It was a rainy evening in the bustling city of Ridgewood. Inside the luxurious confines of the Roselle, the city's most celebrated fine dining restaurant, a story was quietly beginning to unfold, one that would intertwine the lives of a grieving tycoon and a young woman seeking a new beginning. Ethan Caldwell, a 58-year-old business magnate, sat at his usual corner table. Known for his sharp mind and unparalleled success, few would guess the pain he carried beneath his composed exterior. It had been over 2 decades since his wife, Margaret, vanished without a trace, leaving only questions and a void no wealth could fill. Tonight, as the rain traced patterns on the restaurant's glass windows, he would come face to face with the impossible. Across the room, a waitress moved gracefully between tables, her presence as unassuming as magnetic. For a moment, Ethan thought his eyes were playing tricks on him. Her features, those deep hazel eyes and the delicate curve of her smile, mirror Margaret's. It was as though time had rewound, resurrecting the woman who had haunted his dreams for 20 years. But who was she? And why did she seem so eerily familiar? Ethan's heart raced as questions stormed through his mind. Was she connected to Margaret's mysterious disappearance, or was this some cruel coincidence? Unable to resist, he summoned her to his table, setting the stage for a revelation that would unravel secrets buried in the past and alter the course of their lives forever. As you read this story, you'll uncover twists, betrayals, and truths that will leave you breathless. What lies ahead for Ethan and this enigmatic young woman? The answers might surprise you. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more captivating tales that explore the power of fate and family. Tell us where you're tuning in from in the comments. We'd love to hear from you. Stay with us as we unravel the mysteries that connect the past to the present in a story of love, loss, and rediscovery. The truth is just beginning to reveal itself. Ethan's fingers trembled slightly as he adjusted his cufflinks, his gaze locked on the young waitress gliding effortlessly across the room. Her presence was magnetic yet familiar, pulling at threads of memories he had tried to bury. The soft murmur of conversations and the clinking of glasses faded into the background as his mind raced through the years. Unaware of the storm she had just stirred, the waitress moved with a grace that seemed almost practiced. Her dark brown hair was swept into a loose bien-auré, accentuating a quiet that served the waitress's elegance. Ethan felt a pang in his chest. It wasn't just her resemblance to Margaret, but how she carried herself, confident, poised, and undunded. Taking a steadying breath, Ethan gestured for the maitre d', Charles, who had been a trousseau for years. "Charles," Ethan said, and voice low but firm, "I need to know who that waitress is." Charles followed Ethan's gaze and smiled. "Ah, you mean Lily Emerson? She's new here. I started just a few months ago. Quite diligent and well-mannered. Came here from Hartford, I believe, looking for a fresh start." The name hit Ethan like a cold wave. Lily. It was the name he and Margaret had chosen for their unborn daughter, which carried his pulse quickened as fragments of the past began to resurface. "Call her to my table," Ethan said, his witch chand carrying in hand carriager. Lily approached, her steps light yet purposeful. She stood before Ethan, her expression polite but curious. "Good evening, sir. Is there something I can assist you with?" she asked, her voice soft yet resonant. For a moment, Ethan couldn't respond. Her voice, it carried the same warmth, the same timbre that Margaret's had. Gathering himself, he offered a faint smile. "Please, have a seat. I promise I won't take much of your time." Lily hesitated, glancing at Charles, who gave her a reassuring nod. She carefully sat down, her hands folded neatly in her lap. "Is everything all right, sir?" she asked, her tone tinged with concern. Ethan studied her face closely, noting every detail, the arch of her brows, the subtle tilt of her head, the faint birthmark behind her ear. It was uncanny. He felt as though he were staring into a reflection of a life he thought he had lost forever. He finally spoke, his voice measured. "You remind me of someone I once knew. Someone very dear to me." He paused, watching for her reaction. "Where did you grow up, Lily?" Her brows knitted slightly at the question, but she answered with ease. "I grew up in an orphanage in Hartford. I never knew my parents. They left me there when I was just a baby." The words struck Ethan with the force of a gale. Orphanage. Hartford. His mind began connecting dots he hadn't dared to consider before. Could it be possible? Could this young woman be the daughter Margaret had been carrying when she disappeared? Suppressing the flood of emotions threatening to overwhelm him, Ethan leaned forward. "Lily," he said, choosing his words carefully, "do you know anything about your origins? Anything at all?" Lily shook her head, her expression softening. "Not much, sir. Just that I was left wrapped in a blanket with the initials MC embroidered. That's all I've ever had." Ethan's breath hitched. MC. Margaret Che's initials sent a chill down his spine. He clasped his hands, his wedding ring glinting faintly under the restaurant's warm lights. "I'd like to get to know you better," he said, his voice sincere. "There's something about you that feels significant. I can't explain it." Lily tilted her head, her gaze on his face. "That's kind of you, but I'm not sure why someone like you would be interested in my story." Ethan smiled faintly. Sometimes life gives us connections we can't ignore. The following day, Ethan sat in his office, his thoughts consumed by Lily. The pieces of the puzzle were too compelling to dismiss. Margaret's disappearance, the orphanage, the initials on the blanket alinted to a possibility he had never dared to entertain. He picked up his phone and dialed his private investigator, Michael Grayson. "Michael," Ethan said, his voice steady, "I'd like you to look into someone. A young woman named Lily Emerson. She works at the Roselle. Find out everything you can about her past, especially her time in the orphanage." Accustomed to ethicustomets, Michael simply replied, "Consider Michael it done." As the days passed, Ethan continued his quiet observations of Lil in action, each fleeting accustomed belief that she was Michael Keeliel connected to Margaret. He offered her a job as his assistant, explaining that he needed someone with diligence and adaptability. Though hesitant, Lily eventually accepted, drawn by the opportunity to leave her waitressing days behind. Her first day at Caldwell Enterprises was one of excitement. Ethan personally welcomed her, guiding her through the towering glass building. "This will be your workspace," he said, opening the door to a sunlit office adjacent to his own. On the desk sat an element, a quiet homage to Ma sat on the Descargaret's favorite flower. Lily's eyes lingered on the orchids, her expression distant. "They're beautiful," she murmured inane orchids. "They remind me sat on the desk of something I can't quite place." Ethan felt his chest tighten. Margaret had often said the same thing. "They require care and patience to bloom," he said softly, echoing Margaret's words. "Just like people." As the weeks passed, Lily's presence began to transform the office. Her fresh ideas and natural charisma brought new energy to the team, but her conversations with Ethan deepened their bypassed coffee breaks and shared lunches. She revealed glimpses of her childhood, her struggles in the orphanage, her longing to K origins, and her dreams for the future. Ethan, in turn, shared fragments of his life with Margaret, careful not to overwhelm her. Yet, with every story, he felt the weight of unspoken truths pressing down on him. The blue blanket, the initials, her striking resemblance to Margaret. He couldn't keep these revelations to himself much longer. One evening, as the city lights glittered through the office windows, Ethan approached Lily with a leather-bound journal. "This belonged to someone significant to me," he said, handing it to her. "I think it might answer some questions for both of us." Lily accepted the journal with a curious signification. As she flipped through its pages, she froze at an entry that described a small, blue blanket with the initials MC. Tears welled in her eyes as the truth began to dawn on her. "Who was she?" Lily whispered, her voice trembling. Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, his own emotions barely contained. "She was my wife. And your mother?" The room fell into a charged silence, both grappling with the moment's enormity and twith falling against more. Its rhythmic pattern a haunting reminder of the night their paths first crossed. The journey grappling with the moment's enormity had only just begun. But in that moment, Ethan and Lily took their first steps toward rebuilding the family they never knew they still had. The revelation hung in the air, heavy and unrelenting. Lily clutched the leather-bound journal, her mind racing with fragmented thoughts. The idea that Ethan, a man she had barely known a few weeks ago, could be her father was overwhelming and surreal. Yet, the details in the journal, the undeniable resemblance, and the initials on her blanket painted a picture she could not ignore. "I don't know what to say," Lily finally murmured, her voice trembling as she looked up at Ethan. It's too much." Ethan's expression softened, hope and caution flickering in his eyes. "Lily, I know this is overwhelming. I've spent years searching for answers about your mother's disappearance, and now, finding you. It feels like fate. But I won't push you. I just need you to know that I believe you're my daughter." Lily's grip on the journal tightened. "If this is true," she said hesitantly, "what happened to her? To my mother? How could she just vanish without a trace?" Ethan let out a deep sigh, his gaze turning toward the windows. "That's the part one don't know," he admitted. "But I'm determined to find out. I've been piecing together fragments of her last days, and with your help, I think we can finally uncover the truth." A mix of emotions flickered across Lily's face: fear, hope, and a cautious sense of trust. "What do we do next?" she asked softly. Ethan smiled faintly, the weight of years of unanswered questions beginning to lift. "First," he said, "we need definitive proof. A DNA test. After that, we'll start digging into the details of your mother's disappearance." The following morning, Ethan arranged for the DNA test at one of the most reputable laboratories in the city. Lily accompanied him, her nerves evident in her hands, fidgeting with her bag strap. Ethan offered her a reassuring smile as they entered the pristine facility. "This is just a formality," he said gently. "No matter the result, I want you to know that you've already become an important part of my life." Lily nodded, her lips forming a faint smile. "Thank you," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. The test itself was quick, but the wait for the results felt endless. During those days, Ethan discovered more about Margaret's last known whereabouts. He revisited old files, contacted former investigators, and even reviewed financial records from that period. Lily, meanwhile, found herself drawn to the journal, reading and rereading Margaret's entries in search of clues. One evening, as they sat in Ethan's study, Lily came across a passage that struck her like lightning. "Look at this," she said, pointing a G. She mentioned someone named Edward, her brother. She wrote that he was involved in something shady and that she planned to confront him just before her disappearance. Ethan's jaw tightened at the mention of Edward. "I always suspected he was hiding something," he said grimly. "He was evasive during the initial investigation, but I never had enough evidence to press further." "Do you think he could have had something to do with what happened to her?" Lily asked, her voice tinged with both curiosity and fear. Ethan's eyes darkened. "It's possible, and if he did, I intend to find out." A week later, the DNA test results arrived. Ethan and Lily sat together in his office, the envelope resting between them like a silent harbinger of fate. Lily's hands trembled as she reached for it, but Ethan stopped her with a gentle touch. "We'll open it together," he said, his voice steady but tinged with emotion. With a deep breath, Lily tore open the envelope and unfolded the paper inside. Her eyes scanned the words, her heart pounding as she concluded, 99.99% probability of paternity. Tears welled in her eyes as she turned to Ethan. "It's true," she whispered. "You're my father." Ethan's breath caught, his own eyes glistening. He reached out and enveloped her in a hug, the years of hugging her away at that moment. "I've waited so long," he said, his voice choked with emotion. "You have no idea how much this means to me." Their joy, however, was tempered by the questions that remained unanswered. What had happened to Margaret? And what role, if any, had Edward played in her disappearance? Determined to find answers, Ethan and Lily decided to confront Edward directly. Ethan arranged a meeting at the Caldwell family estate, where Edward had lived since Margaret's disappearance. The sprawling mansion was as imposing as its owner, its walls seeming to guard the secrets buried within. Edward greeted them with his usual air of arrogance, but his composure faltered when he saw Lily. His eyes widened, and fear flashed across his face for a fleeting moment. "Who is this?" Edward demanded, his voice sharp. "This," Ethan replied, his tone icy, "is Lily, my daughter, Margaret's daughter." Edward's face turned ashen. That's impossible, he stammered, his gaze darting between them. Ethan stepped closer, his presence commanding. We have proof, Edward. Also, now about the suspicious activities that Margaret had been investigating before she disappeared. It's time you tell us the truth. Edward's hands clenched at his sides, his usual bravado replaced by a palpable tension. You don't know what you're talking about, he said, his voice wavering. Lily stepped forward, her voice steady despite the storm raging within her. I deserve to know the truth. You'll tell us what happened if you cared about her, even a little. Edward's resolve seemed to crumble under her piercing gaze. He sank into a chair, his shoulders slumping as he heaved a heavy sigh. Fine, he said, his voice barely audible. I'll tell you everything. What followed was a confession that left Ethan and Lily reeling. Edward admitted to orchestrating a scheme to siphon funds from the family business and using Margaret's trust to cover his tracks. When she discovered the fraud, she confronted him, threatening to expose him unless he came clean. Desperate to protect himself, Edward devised a plan to silence her. I didn't mean for her to disappear, Edward said, trembling. I just wanted her to leave for a while, to give me time to fix things. But something went wrong. She never came back. Ethan's fists clenched, anger and grief coursing through him. You let me believe she abandoned us, he said, his voice shaking. You let me live with that pain for 20 years. Edward looked away, unable to meet his brother's eyes. I'm sorry, he muttered, though the words felt hollow. Lily's voice broke the tense silence. Where did she go? What happened to her after she left? Edward hesitated, then said, There was a house. A safe place I arranged for her. She was supposed to stay there until things calmed down. I can give you the address. Ethan and Lily exchanged a glance, a mix of determination and dread in their eyes. They knew the road ahead would be fraught with challenges, but they were ready to face it together. The search for Margaret was far from over, but they had a lead for the first time in 2 decades, and they wouldn't stop until they uncovered the whole truth. Edward's address led Ethan and Lily to a remote area on the city's outskirts. The house was an old colonial structure, its faded white paint peeling under the weight of time. The once beautiful garden surrounding it was now overgrown, its wildness a stark reminder of abandonment. An eerie stillness settled over them as they pulled into the gravel driveway. This is it, Ethan murmured, gripping the steering wheel tightly. He glanced at Lily, who stared out the window with wide eyes, her breath shallow. Are you ready? Lily nodded, though her hands trembled in her lap. I've been waiting my whole life to know what happened to her. The front door creaked as Ethan pushed it open, revealing a dim interior filled with dust and the faint scent of mildew. The air felt heavy as if the house had too long concealed secrets. As they stepped inside, they noticed signs of a hurried departure. A chair toppled over, a single shoe lying askew by the doorway, and an old, tattered scarf draped across a chair. Lily picked it up, her heart pounding. It was a vibrant teal, her favorite color. She clutched it tightly, feeling an inexplicable connection to it. This place hasn't been touched in years, Ethan observed, his voice echoing in the space. They began to search the house, moving cautiously through each room. Lily found an old photograph of a smiling, pregnant woman in the living room beside a window. Her hands shook as she held it up to Ethan. It's her, she whispered, her voice thick with emotion. It's Mom. Ethan took the photograph, his eyes misting as he traced Margaret's face with his thumb. She was here, he said, his voice barely audible. This was where she was supposed to be safe. They moved to the upstairs bedroom, where they discovered a small wooden chest at the foot of the bed. Inside were handwritten letters, their ink smudged but still legible. The letters were addressed to Ethan, and as Lily began to read them aloud, her voice cracked with every word. Ethan, I don't know how long I can stay hidden. Edward's threats are growing worse. I fear for our child and myself, but I don't want to run anymore. I need to protect our family, no matter the cost. Tears streamed down Lily's face as she read the last letter, dated only days before Margaret's disappearance. If something happens to me, tell our daughter I loved her more than anything. I hope she'll grow up to be strong, kind, and brave. Just like you. Ethan turned away, his shoulders trembling. She was so close to coming back, he said, his voice thick with anguish. She was trying to protect us. Suddenly, Lily noticed a minor key taped to the back of one of the letters. "What's this?" she asked, holding it up. Ethan's eyes narrowed. It could be for a safe. "Let's keep looking." Their search led them to a hidden panel in the study, behind which they found a small safe embedded in the wall. Using the key, Ethan unlocked it, revealing a trove of documents and a sealed envelope marked for Ethan. Inside the envelope was a handwritten note from Margaret detailing Edward's embezzlement and his threats to destroy the family if she exposed him. The final line of the note read, "If you're reading this, I may not have made it, but promise me you'll fight for our daughter and our family's legacy." With the letters and documents in hand, Ethan and Lily returned to Caldwell Enterprises, their determination steeled by the evidence they had uncovered. They knew it was time to confront Edward publicly and expose the truth. Ethan called an emergency board meeting to gather all the company's key figures. As they entered the conference room, the tension was palpable. Edward sat at the head of the table, his expression calm but his eyes betraying a flicker of unease when he saw Ethan and Lily. "What's this about?" Edward asked, his voice laced with irritation. "I hope you're not dragging the company into another one of your crusades, Ethan." Ethan stepped forward, placing the letters and documents on the table. "This is about the truth, Edward. The truth about what you did to Margaret and the lies you've lived for the past 20 years. The room fell silent as Ethan began to recount Margaret's story, laying out the evidence piece by piece. He presented the letters, the financial records, and the details of Edward's threats. Lily stood beside him, her presence a silent testament to the family Edward had tried to destroy. "You used my wife's love and trust against her," Ethan said, his voice steady but filled with anger. "You drove her into hiding and left me to grieve, all to protect your greed." Edward's facade cracked as murmurs rippled through the boardroom. "This is nonsense," he snapped, though his voice lacked conviction. "You can't prove anything." Ethan's eyes narrowed. "Can't I? We have Margaret's letters, her account of your actions, and the evidence from the safe. You've been embezzling from this company for decades, and now everyone knows the truth." The board members turned to Edward, their expressions a mix of shock and betrayal. One of them, an older man named Harrison, spoke up. "Edward, is this true?" Edward hesitated, his confidence evaporating under the weight of the evidence. I only did what I had to," he stammered. "Margaret would have ruined everything." "You ruined everything," Lily said, her voice cutting through the tension. "You tore our family apart and left us with nothing but pain. And now, you'll face the consequences." Realizing he was cornered, Edward slumped in his chair, his defiance replaced by defeat. "Fine," he muttered. "Do whatever you want." Ethan turned to the board. "Edward is to be removed from his position immediately, and we will cooperate fully with the authorities to ensure justice is served. His corruption will no longer taint this company." The board members nodded in agreement, their loyalty to Edward shattered. As the meeting adjourned, Edward was escorted out, his legacy reduced to disgrace. That evening, Ethan and Lily sat in his office, the weight of the day's events beginning to settle. "We've come so far," Lily said, her voice soft. "But there's still so much to process." Ethan nodded, his gaze distant. "We've uncovered the truth about Edward, but we still don't have all the answers about your mother. There's one last thing we need to do." "What's that?" Lily asked. "We need to bring Margaret home," Ethan replied. "It's time to give her the peace she deserves." As they prepared for the final chapter of their journey, father and daughter found solace in the bond they had forged, a bond that would carry them through whatever came next. The past had cast its shadow over their lives for too long, but now they were ready to enter the light together. The morning was overcast as Ethan and Lily arrived at the small cemetery on the outskirts of Hartford. They had spent weeks navigating bureaucratic red tape to confirm that Margaret had been buried under a false name in this unassuming plot arranged by Edward to obscure her identity. Now, they were here to reclaim her, to bring her back to the family that had long mourned her loss. The graveyard was quiet, its rows of headstones weathered by time. As they approached the modest Anna Carter marker, Lily carried a bouquet of orchids, Margaret's favorite flowers. Ethan's heart tightened at the sight of it, the weight of 2 decades of grief and unanswered questions pressing down on him. "This is where she's been all this time," Lily murmured, her voice trembling. "All alone." Ethan placed a hand on her shoulder, his expression solemn. "Not anymore," he said softly. "We're taking her home." The process of exhuming Margaret's remains and transferring them to the family plot in Ridgewood was a sad affair. Ethan spared no expense to ensure it was done with the utmost care and respect. The move symbolized a physical and spiritual return, a chance to finally honor Margaret's memory properly. When the day of the reburial arrived, the family plot in Ridgewood was transformed into a serene tribute to Margaret. Friends, colleagues, and even some of the board members who had worked alongside Ethan attended the small, private ceremony. The air was thick with emotion as Ethan and Lily stood together, united in their shared mission to give Margaret the dignity she deserved. Ethan spoke first, his voice steady despite the tears glistening in his eyes. "Margaret was the heart of our family, the light that guided us. Losing her left a void that nothing could fill. But today, we honor her not as a wife and a mother, but as a woman of strength, love, and courage. She faced unimaginable trials, and though she's no longer with us, her legacy lives on." Lily stepped forward next, clutching the bouquet of orchids. Her voice wavered, but she pushed through, her words heartfelt. "I didn't get to know you, Mom, but I feel like I've carried a part of you all my life. I promise to honor you by living the kind you would be proud of. A life full of love, kindness, and strength." The sun broke through the clouds as the ceremony concluded, casting a warm, golden light over the cemetery. It felt, to both Ethan and Lily, like a sign of Margaret's approval, a quiet assurance that they were on the right path. With Margaret now laid to rest, Ethan and Lily turned their attention to building the future she would have wanted for them. Caldwell Enterprises underwent a significant transformation, with Lily officially joining the leadership team. Her innovative ideas and fresh perspective renewed the company's sense of purpose. One of her first initiatives was the launch of the Margaret Caldwell Foundation, a charitable organization dedicated to supporting orphaned and underprivileged children. Its programs ranged from education scholarships to foster care support, ensuring no child would have to endure Lily's struggles growing up. The foundation's launch event was a grand affair attended by influential figures across the city. Lily took the stage, her confidence growing with every word as she shared the story of her mother's strength and the foundation's mission to carry on her legacy. "My mother believed in the power of love and kindness to change the world," Lily said, her voice steady and clear. "Through this foundation, we aim to create opportunities for children who need them the most, ensuring every child has a chance to thrive." Ethan watched from the audience, his heart swelling with pride. Lily was carrying forward Margaret's vision and creating one of her own, one rooted in compassion and hope. At the same time, Ethan makes it his mission to repair the personal relationships affected by Margaret's disappearance. He reached out to old friends and colleagues, many of whom had distanced themselves during the tumultuous years of grief and uncertainty. Slowly but surely, he rebuilt the support network that had once been the cornerstone of his life. Ethan and Lily also worked to strengthen their bond, spending time together outside of work. They often visited Margaret's orchid garden, now restored to its former glory. It became a sanctuary for both of them, a place to reflect, dream, and remember. One crisp autumn afternoon, as they tended to the garden together, Ethan turned to Lily. "You've grown into an incredible woman," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "Your mother would be so proud of you." Lily smiled, her eyes misty. "And she'd be proud of you, too, Dad, for never giving up on her, or us." Their conversation was interrupted by the chime of Lily's phone. She glanced at the screen and smiled. "It's an update from the foundation," she said. "Our new scholarship program just approved its first batch of students. 20 kids are about to have their lives changed." Ethan's face lit up with pride. "Margaret would have loved this," he said. "She always wanted to make a difference." As for Edward, the consequences of his actions caught up with him swiftly. The evidence uncovered during Ethan and Lily's investigation led to a highly publicized trial. Edward was found guilty of embezzlement and obstruction of justice, receiving a lengthy prison sentence. The revelations about his role in Margaret's disappearance and fraudulent activities left his reputation in shambles. Though justice was served, Ethan and Lily chose not to dwell on Edward's downfall. They focused on moving forward, honoring Margaret's memory by building a life filled with purpose and love. The Caldwell name became synonymous with business excellence, ethical leadership, and philanthropy in the following months. Ethan and Lily's story inspired many, serving as a testament to the power of resilience, truth, and the unbreakable bonds of family. The orchid garden at the Caldwell estate symbolized their journey, a living reminder of the love that had endured and the hope that had been rekindled. Visitors often remarked on its beauty, unaware of the story it represented. One evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Ethan and Lily stood in the garden, watching the orchids sway gently in the breeze. "We've come so far," Ethan said, his voice filled with quiet pride. "And there's still so much to do," Lily replied, her eyes shining with determination. "But whatever comes next, we'll face it together." As the stars emerged, they lingered in the garden, surrounded by the legacy of a woman whose love had never indeed left them. Together, they looked toward a future filled with promise, knowing that the past, though painful, had given them the strength to bloom. Months turned into years, and the ripple effects of Margaret's story touched lives far beyond what Ethan and Lily could have imagined. The Margaret Caldwell Foundation has grown exponentially, with its programs reaching nationwide. Lily poured her heart into the foundation, often visiting orphanages and hosting events to ensure its mission remained personal. On one such visit to an orphanage in Chicago, Lily met a young girl named Ava, who reminded her of herself at that age. Ava, with her wide eyes and shy demeanor, had been in the foster system for years, longing for stability but wary of trusting others. The girl's hesitant expression shifted as Lily knelt to speak with her. "You remind me of my mom," Ava said softly, surprising herself and Lily. The comment struck a chord, bringing back memories of Margaret's journal and her dreams of helping children like Ava. By the end of the visit, Lily had not only connected with Ava, but had also arranged for her to receive a scholarship to pursue her passion for art. The experience deepened Lily's resolve to expand the foundation's reach, ensuring no child would feel forgotten. Meanwhile, Caldwell Enterprises flourished under Ethan and Lily's leadership. The company, once associated with Edward's scandals, became a beacon of innovation and ethical practices. They developed groundbreaking technologies to solve real-world problems, from renewable energy solutions to accessibility-focused software. One of their most celebrated projects was Orchid Connect, a digital platform designed to match orphan children with potential adoptive families using advanced algorithms and virtual reality to foster meaningful connections before formal adoptions. The platform directly resulted from Lily's experiences and desire to bridge the gap for children like herself. During a press conference to unveil the platform, Ethan stood beside Lily, his pride evident. "This project embodies everything Margaret stood for," he said, addressing the crowd. "It's a testament to her belief in the power of love and the resilience of the human spirit. And it's a reflection of Lily's extraordinary vision." The audience applauded, and Lily felt profound fulfillment for the first time. She had found her purpose, and through her work, she was keeping her mother's memory alive. On the anniversary of Margaret's disappearance, Ethan and Lily organized a special event in the orchid garden at the Caldwell estate. The gathering was intimate and attended by close friends, foundation supporters, and former beneficiaries of their programs. The garden had become a sacred space, its vibrant blossoms a symbol of hope and healing. As the evening unfolded, Ethan took the stage to share a heartfelt speech. "This garden is more than a tribute to Margaret," he began, his voice steady but emotional. "It's a reminder of what love and determination can achieve. Even in the face of loss, we found our way back to each other. And through this journey, we've learned that family isn't just about blood. It's about the bonds we choose to nurture." Lily joined him, holding a small silver locket that had belonged to Margaret. She opened it to reveal the tiny photograph of her mother on one side and the inscription on the other. "May you always bloom where you are planted." "This locket has guided me," Lily said, her voice resonant. It reminds me that even in the darkest times, there's a light waiting to be found. My mother's strength and my father's unwavering love have shown me that the greatest legacy we can leave is one of kindness, resilience, and hope. As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the garden in a golden glow, Lily and Ethan invited everyone to plant a tiny orchid in Margaret's honor. The ceremony was cathartic and celebratory, merging past pain and future promise. Years later, the Caldwell name had become synonymous with compassion, innovation, and integrity. Ethan, now semi-retired, spent much of his time mentoring young entrepreneurs and tending to the orchid garden. His once busy life had found a quieter, more meaningful rhythm centered around the relationships he held dear. Lily, now a prominent leader in the foundation and the company, had become a symbol of resilience for many. Her story of finding her family, uncovering the truth, and transforming pain into purpose inspired countless individuals to pursue their journeys of healing and growth. On a breezy spring afternoon, Lily walked through the garden with Ava, now a teenager and one of the foundation's brightest scholarship recipients. As they sat beneath the shade of an ancient oak tree, Ava turned to her. "Do you think your mom would be proud of everything you've done?" Ava asked. Lily smiled, her eyes misting with emotion. "I know she would," she said, "because I do everything I do with her in my heart." Nearby, Ethan watched the two of them with quiet pride. The journey had been long and fraught with challenges, but rich with lessons and love. Margaret's legacy was no longer a distant memory, but a living force woven into the lives of everyone Ethan and Lily had touched. As the sun set, casting a warm, golden light over the garden, the orchids swayed gently in the breeze, their delicate petals glowing like beacons of hope. It was a fitting tribute to a woman whose love had transcended time and tragedy, bringing her family back together and inspiring a brighter future for future generations. The Caldwell family had found its way home, and in doing so, they had built a legacy that would bloom forever.